Alright, so I think I'm already 4 minutes late. Even though I was here early, it's a special gift. Yeah. I got in very late last night, so I'm still trying to associate myself with everything here. I've never been on campus before, and I ended up over in the sports complex. I'm like, these are not my people. Where am I supposed? This is not where I'm supposed to be, Google. So, but I found my way, obviously. I'm going to ask that we don't record the talk today. If you guys want to do still shots, that's fine. I've got a lot of client photos and things in here from the field, so I really just don't want it floating around on YouTube. I will have a releasable set of the slides. My contact information will be at the end, so if you want a copy of the slides, I'd be happy to share them with you. I just don't want videos out there, so no snapping or whatever it is that we do with videos now. Alright, so for those of you who don't know me, which is probably all of you, never been here before, so probably not. I'm what's called an executive security consultant for now, for a company called SecureCon. So what that means is I occasionally get to use covered airport parking and not get in trouble. It's cool. So I'm a pen tester by trade, right? So I've been doing this for a little while now, a little ins, a little outs. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I also co-authored a book on creating an awareness program, the thing that nobody wants to do in the industry. So that was a good experience. One of the other things that I do fairly frequently is social engineering training as well. So kind of do some technical, some physical, some social, and it blends together a lot. So I wanted to put this talk together because it really pieces together some stuff that doesn't look like a very big deal individually, and then tie it together in the end and show you some of the ways that we've put it together in the field. I tried to keep it fairly high level, but if something's not clear, just, ask away. This is usually a joint talk with my boss, too, so I'm trying to figure out how to do this without saying we the entire time, if you're wondering why. So if a we slips, that would be why. So physical security. We all know that it's really important, right? Don't touch that. At the end of the day, we're all guarding the same stuff. But when you tell somebody that you work in computer security, the reaction is usually, wow, you are like so smart. If you tell somebody that you work in physical security, you get the, aww, I'm sure you're gonna get a better job someday, right? I mean, you're working your way through school, yes? I'm sure it's just to pay the bills. But we're really guarding the exact same thing. And I think that in the industry, those pieces depend on each other a lot, but don't understand each other a lot. So one of the ways that we're working to fix that at SecureCon, I can use we in that sense, is to really start to include the physical and the cyber and the social pieces all together to emulate more real-world attacks. We do a lot of work with utilities and critical infrastructure. The utility space has room for improvement, let's say. They don't really understand cyber threats to any extent. Physical security is sort of there, but not really. So a lot of the examples, I've got some SCADA-like examples in here today. I think I've got some other stuff in here too. So when we scope the stuff, it's usually called physical penetration testing, which sounds really dirty if you're not used to this industry. You can always tell the people who aren't used to hearing the terminology because you get that like really awkward pause. They're like, for real? Interesting stuff. So it's not just about breaking in. There are a lot of other things that we evaluate when we look at this kind of stuff. Not all physical controls are meant to prevent entry. Some of them are really meant to delay entry, such as fences. Fences aren't really meant to prevent entry. They're meant to slow you down enough for somebody to actually see you and decide that you probably don't belong there if you're trying to climb the fence and do something about it. So we look for a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be in combination with a technical or on the cyber side of a pen test. Bless you. We like to combine them when possible, but not all of our clients are down with that because they think it's cheating. because bad people don't break into buildings, apparently. Who knew? So I wanted to go over some of the basics of how it works. So before we do anything, we gotta have our letter. Right, this letter is very important. It usually keeps us from going to jail. Usually. I've only had to show it once, so, and it did keep me from going to jail, which was nice. We'll get to that later. It's basically a high-level, just a single-page document that's from usually the head of security or whoever they report to. It says, you know, this person is conducting a physical test from these dates to these dates in these locations. If you are presented with this letter, please contact, it's usually, you know, the head of physical security at that point. All right, and then everybody in the environment signs it. CIO usually does as well, since we're going to probably be touching technical things. And we carry that with us. Make copies. Because stuff happens, right? I mean, if you're going to be dumpster diving and crawling around and climbing fences, like, you don't want to drop your letters somewhere and then your only copy not be there if you need it. Not that I would know, but copies are good. So a lot of our clients, because we're based out of DC, don't really want to pay for us to travel places to do reconnaissance. So we've kind of had to get creative and figure out how to do a lot of that without traveling. So what we try to look for is really to try to get the lay of the land before we travel to wherever that site's going to be. And there are some lovely tools to do that. In the physical space, you'll find that some of the tools are sophisticated, bless you, and some are not. It's really how we put them together, right? So you're going to see Google in a whole new way at this point. Google Maps is great. I only have 2 uses for Bing. Bing Maps is actually fairly useful because it has a 3D view where you can kind of tilt and see around the sides of the building, which is really cool. Google doesn't have it everywhere yet, but they're starting to expand. But what I'm looking for there is really just what's in this environment. Are we contracted to break into this building or test this entire campus? Sometimes we're supposed to look for a data center or a control center. Sometimes the client tells us where that is, like what building. Other times we have to try to figure it out because they think that that's hard. I love crushing their dreams. So it really kind of depends on what we're doing. But when we're looking from afar, we're really just trying to get the lay of the land, right? So really trying to see what's there, what's around any of those areas. So if you're doing a test in downtown Chicago, those surroundings are going to be really different from like rural Pennsylvania, right? But what I'm doing there, not only looking at entryways and potential places for parking, right, because you got to get to and from somewhere there somehow. I'm also looking for what's around, right? Is there a Starbucks nearby? Is there some kind of restaurant nearby? Because we're going to use that later on in some of the social engineering pieces that we do. So Google started doing traffic cameras a handful of years ago. They've gotten pretty good at it. So this is useful, especially if we're doing a test in somewhere like New York and Manhattan. I can sit and watch the traffic patterns in and out of that building all day without pants at home, and it's great. I don't have to worry about hiding anywhere. When we look at the traffic patterns, we're really just trying to understand the flow of that building. So it's common for our clients to only occupy, say, half of a floor in a high-rise. So while I'm only really worried about the 12th floor or whatever it is, I need to understand how much traffic's going in and out of the building for a couple of different reasons, right? I might want to use some of that as cover to kind of slip in and out. I want to know when it's busy and when it's not, because depending on the attack that we decide to do, we might want to wait until it's busy. So it's good to know what the hours of the building tend to be like. Some folks, like, they come in really early. They're like a 7:30 kind of crowd, and I hate that. But, you know, that's fine. The other thing that we like to use this for is at night. Yeah, I watch traffic cameras at night in the dark because I want to see when the lights come on each floor. Because most of the cleaning companies are only allowed in there after hours. And if I need the cleaning company to let me in or turn off the alarm if they have an en-suite alarm, like I want to know a rough idea of when the cleaning crew is going to be there so that we can kind of plan who's going to be where and when. Traffic cameras, they're very useful. Probably for traffic too. I don't really know about that, but they're great for other things. So because we're not in the Washington, D.C. area, nobody is going to know what is at 500 Delaney Street, so I'll tell you. Spoiler, 500 Delaney Street in Alexandria is the United States Patent and Trademark Office. This is a really nice building, which means it can't possibly be theirs. Because most of the buildings downtown are not awesome, that are government owned. And this one's very pretty. It's got big glass atrium and lots of fancy things, right? So no way this building is theirs. We'll get to that in a minute. So if we're just Googling for now, right, we're just going to Google, we're going to check out some Street View. I like Street View a lot. It kind of gives me a heads up of what's going to be around before I actually get there. I mentioned something about watching traffic patterns in and out of the building. If there's not a camera nearby that I can access legally to watch those patterns in and out of the building, I'm going to need to find a way to do that once I get there. So in this photo, I see a great place where I can do that. I'll even share my newspaper with that dude there on that bench. I'm nice like that. And what I'm looking for in photos like these in these kinds of areas, so we're looking for the card readers on the doors, right? I noticed they use them here. They're kind of smaller. Usually they're more square, a little easier to see. That kind of helps me understand what kind of system they're using for entry. And we will get into some details of that in a little bit. The fact that I don't see any of those squares on the outside on this photo tells me that that's probably an open lobby. So probably folks can just kind of go in and out of there, and there's a control point beyond that area. But I'm not sure yet. So I'm going to look around some more. Back to, they can't possibly own this building, right? So you pull up the tax website here for the city of Alexandria and see what they paid in their property taxes to see who owns the building. They paid a lot of money in property taxes. So it's owned by Alcor, which is really convenient for me. They manage a lot of higher-end properties in the Alexandria, D.C. area. And while some companies are really good about making sure that there are not sensitive photos and things on their website, if they're leasing a space, the owner of that space is probably not being as careful about that, right? Because they're so proud of it. They want you to see how beautiful and how safe and special their properties are. So Alcor's website tells you all about the headquarters campus. So it's actually a big kind of a U shape of buildings. So all of the buildings in this photo technically are the Patent and Trademark Office, with the one with the big glass atrium being the one in this shot from the street view. So this is useful. You know, you kind of read through here, it tells you a little bit about the campus. It's got some great photos. So if you look at the photo on your right, that looks a whole lot like that, right? The other side of that. So what I don't see there, if I zoom in, I'll get a better picture next time, sorry. What you don't see on the inside of those doors are turnstiles or any kind of control point for somebody to present a credential, like a badge or some kind of key fob or whatever. So, very safe bet that it's an open lobby. If you do a little bit more reading, you'll know that there's an actual little museum for the trademark office right in that lobby. So they have school tours and things in and out of there all the time. So it's a very high traffic area in the lobby. So it's pretty easy if you wanted to get a little bit closer to see where the rest of the control access points are and what technology they might be using. Now you can get in a little bit closer to get a better look. Yes?
Have you ever had a case where, let's say that picture was from 2015 and then you show off and it's changed? Like now there is an entry point, you're like, oh no.
Not the first time.
Okay.
So we've had clients that have made changes after we've broken in that don't get updated in maps and Street View and things like that. So it's like, oh wow, that's new. So that's why we always make sure that we do an off-site and then an on-site. We don't just get off the plane and then go try to break in, right? You know, it takes a little warm-up to kind of get acclimated with the area. But yeah, it does happen. Especially, I mean, they update Google Maps and stuff like that fairly often. But even in some of the larger areas, you do see some lag in between. So it's definitely not gospel, but it's usually fairly reliable. Once you start doing this work, you'll look at the world a little bit differently. So everybody here usually sees a very pretty campus, and it looks nice and inviting, and brick walkways and all that. I see that security dome camera sticking out right in the middle of this photo. Just because there are cameras does not mean that somebody's watching them. So while cameras are meant to really, let's say, discourage folks from hanging around, your security guard, your average security guard is watching anywhere between 5 and 100 cameras per guard. They're not going to see everything at that exact moment in time. Cameras are really used for after the fact, more in, we had a break-in, we had a breach, whatever. They pull the camera footage to try to get the face, and so on and so forth. So while cameras are meant to look really intimidating, they are probably not being watched. So don't let that make you too nervous. If you belong there, of course. Disclaimer. So I was really curious about what you have to do to get in there. Turns out I don't really have to go hang out in the lobby because Alcor is very proud of the security that they have. So proud that they put a nice photo of it here for me. So that's really cool. It gives me a lot of information. The turnstiles, for instance, that tells me it's probably not going to be easy to tailgate, to piggyback like behind somebody with a badge. At this area. Doesn't mean that there are other areas in the building that aren't as watched, let's say. But if I want to go in the main way, that looks like it's going to be a little bit difficult to tailgate behind somebody with a working badge if I don't have a working badge. They also, if you look there, have a metal detector and a little tiny x-ray machine. Probably a good assumption that that's for visitors, unbadged folks. That tells me if I'm going to try to get some of my suspicious looking hacking tools inside, that if it looks weird on the x-ray, they might take a little closer look. So I might need to kind of change up the tools that I'm going to bring with me, or disguise them a little bit better, right? Gotta get a little MacGyver. So that's offsite, right? We're just Googling. We haven't gone anywhere yet. Once I have the idea of what it looks like around there, if it's a metropolitan area, whatnot. Now we can start to plan our on-site reconnaissance of who's going to do what, who's going to watch at what time. There are lots of cool ways to do this. You can really get creative with it. We've done all of these at one point or another to do surveillance. Just because you have a stroller doesn't mean that you actually have to have a live baby in that stroller. Okay, you can put a doll in there and cover it up and put the little cover. Oh no, the baby's sleeping. Baby's sleeping. No, baby's sleeping. Don't touch. Don't touch. But the point is, you really just want to blend in with the regular traffic that's around the building. So if it's in an area where there's some residential and stuff mixed in, and folks, they jog through there, or there are people taking walks, there's a train station close to there, like there is at the patent office, it's going to be fairly typical to have just regular foot traffic through that area in addition to the people who belong there. So they're used to seeing folks mixed in with the walking traffic that don't necessarily belong in the actual building. Love the park benches. They're wonderful. Birdseed, feed the birds, relax for a while. Homeless guys, this works in really great places like Chicago. Downtown Chicago. It's very useful. What I didn't mention is I have a little bit of a background in theatrical makeup, so we have a really good time with this sometimes. So when we had to get a volunteer for our homeless guy, Sean wanted to be our homeless guy. So this is Sean normally, and then we made him into Homeless Sean. Right? Well, he's had a rough life, okay? Don't judge him. You just get him a bag with some cans and, something that rattles around. And he can literally lay on the park bench or the street or whatever and observe the traffic in that building and be pretty much ignored until, the beat cop comes along and moves him along, and that's fine. Whatever reconnaissance we do, we want it to blend and be typical. So it's all about not triggering that whole fight or flight deal. Won't go too deep into the psychology of it, but in the brain, there's a part called the hypothalamus that basically controls your inner BS meter, right? So whenever, there aren't really a lot of vendors here, so whenever a vendor tells you, you know, they've got this great product that it's going to fix all of your problems, that like weird twist you just got in your stomach, that's fight or flight, right? It's our internal survival mechanism, we'll say. So we don't want to trigger that. So anything that we can do to blend, that's what we'll do. This only took about 5 minutes to do. The scar on his head is actually one that we got from like a Halloween store. So you attach it with some stuff, and then you just do some makeup around it, right? Some stage blood, a little bit on the top there, and just basic makeup. The dental piece really brings it home, right? So again, right after Halloween, like Party City and those places, all that stuff goes on clearance. So, you know, he looks a lot different after a couple of bucks and some props and a little bit of makeup. He's wearing the same shirt, but you don't really notice the shirt that much because you're kind of distracted by the big gash in his head. So once we're on site, like I said, we want to blend. It's great if there's a coffee shop nearby. You can kind of sit and watch the traffic and all that. For reasons that I will never understand, folks walk around with their work badges dangling from their neck or from their belt line, even in DC. I'll never understand why they feel the need to do this. But they do, so that's fine. It makes my job a lot easier because then I can really start to spot who belongs in what building. So in places like Chicago where you've got a multi-tenant building, it gets a little bit confusing because you got to make sure that you're targeting the right folks. If there's a bar nearby, it's even better, right? So I'm Irish, so it's always better if there's a bar. But sometimes it's the watering hole, the after-work happy hour watering hole. And you can learn a lot if you just sit there and nurse your drink and listen. Listen, take some notes. You get familiar with the terminology, what's going on, the office gossip. Sometimes we have to go vehicle-wise for surveillance. When people say surveillance van, this is usually what pops into mind. If you're trying to blend, I would not recommend that. So when we do surveillance vehicles, it's really important to understand the area that you're in and what's going on around there. If we're doing something like a manufacturing facility that's in an industrial complex, you know, the Uhaul is perfect. There are box trucks that go in and out of there all the time. Sometimes they're Uhauls, sometimes they're something else. Nobody's going to blink twice if they see one of those parked in the street in front of one of these, you know, facilities. And it's useful because you can put your whole team in the back and then kind of trade out. And then if you're doing a wireless test in addition to that, you can be doing some of your wireless work while you're doing your recon as well. It doesn't work in the summer as well when it's really hot though, because then you bake all your hackers in the back. And it's not healthy. Bless you. When we do tests in rural areas, like rural Pennsylvania, learn this the hard way. Make sure that you don't get a brand new foreign model vehicle with out-of-state plates. Right? Because when you're in Chevy and Ford territory and you roll up, you know, Nissan or Honda or, you know, anything not Ford or Chevy, it draws the attention. It really does. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later and how that kind of cost us some points. So you want to bring your supplies with you, right? There's a little bit of prep that goes into this. That thing in the middle is called a map, for those of you who may not be familiar. A long time ago, these used to be paper that you would have to carry with you. I like to keep them still because you can unfold them and lay them out to cover up suspicious items that you might have, like all your wireless equipment and your cameras and your binoculars. If Rent-A-Cop or something sneaks up behind you and you didn't really have a chance to put everything away, you can put the map over it, right? I'm sorry, I'm so lost. I'm from out of town. I'm trying to find... Have a spot picked out beforehand. Can you help me? Am I in the right spot? You know, whatever. It works if you're a guy, too. You don't even have to do ditzy-headed chick for it to work. What we're looking for when we're doing on-site stuff in addition to flow in and out of the building, we're looking for stuff that are, we call them trust pieces, right? So are there parking permits on the cars? Do they all have the same stickers? Are the employees wearing ID cards when they get out of the car? Maybe they don't have them. Some companies don't. Some companies, instead of using a swipe card or a proximity card, they literally just enter a 6-digit PIN. to unlock the gate or unlock the door to go in. Now, some think that that's more secure, and it can't be defeated, but really, it's a 6-digit pin. Most of the numbers that are commonly used are worn off on the keypad. Didn't bring it with me today, but I don't know if anybody's familiar with the infrared guns, the flares. So you can get it pretty good about here to the door, maybe a little bit more, sight on it. So when they touch the buttons, you'll see it on the infrared which buttons they touch. So it'll kind of narrow down what kind of order you need to do that in. So it might take you a couple of tries, but probably not too many because you've only got so many options there. And if you've got somebody who does it nice and slow with one finger for you, it makes it even easier. So when some companies use, swipe card and PIN, they think, it's cool, we're good, nobody will ever figure that out. Usually we figure that out. But that's one of the ways that we do it. So high tech, low tech, and in the middle, right? Once you're inside, it doesn't really matter how you got inside. Usually everything from networks to buildings have the same candy shell, right? It's hard on the outside and then gooey in the center.
Okay.
Usually once you're in, the security controls on the inside are a lot more lax than on the outside. There are pros and cons to this. I won't argue too many of the pros from the commercial side, but from the attacker's side, there are so many pros to this approach. You'll come across a lot of doors that look like this, probably. Those things at the top, those 2 dots to the top, tell me that that's a magnetic lock door. That will be useful later on for a couple of different reasons. I don't remember if I have a slide for it or not, so I'm just going to point it out now. So if there is not a way to get around that door by tricking the access system into unlocking it for us, the hinges are on the outside. If you can't get through it, just take the door off the hinges. So if you carry around like a roofing nail or something about that long or so, up underneath the bottom of that hinge, there's a hole normally there. So you just put that roofing nail in there and you just give it a good whack with something. It doesn't even have to be a hammer. Now the door's not going to come all the way off because the magnet's holding it at the top, right? Magnetic lock. But we don't need it to come all the way off, that's fine. We just need to be able to angle it out a little bit, just far enough to shove the skinniest guy through, right? And then he can open the other door. It doesn't really take very long though. One of my, let's call him more petite coworkers, I think this guy weighs like $1.15 or something. We can have one of those doors off in 30 seconds. So it's not overly difficult, it just takes a little bit of practice to do. I also recommend a commercial grade door stop to go underneath of it if you're going to try that, because that door is really heavy. So once you get it off of the hinges, it's going to bam right down on the floor unless you've got something to hold it there. Home Depot is a great place. Yes?
Yeah. After you're through, is it easy to put the pin back so that it looks like everything's normal?
You can just kind of push it back against.
Oh.
You can put the pin back in if you're polite. I'm not normally polite.
Fair enough.
Usually when we're inside, it's more of smash and grab at that point. The longer that you are inside or you don't belong, the greater chance you risk of getting caught. So it's very much a smash and grab most of the time. I try to be in and out as quickly as possible. But yeah, same process though, right? You just put the hinge pin back in, just whack, whack, whack. But usually we've got the other door open at that point, so it's a lot easier because then you can hold the door from like between, like on the inside. Makes it easy. I mentioned these card readers, right? The little boxes. We use things to open them like cards that look like this, little fobs. These are all the same thing, basically. On the inside, they all have similar chips that do the job. Looking at the little boxes on the wall around the school here, it looks like they use some type of system that's similar. We call that a physical access control system, or a PACS, in the commercial space. There are lots of great tools that you can use for this. In the earlier days, before people got really creative with stuff, like before there was like Raspberry Pi and Arduino and all of that, that made it a lot easier. Started pretty simple with this tool called the Proxima III. It's a research tool. You could weaponize it though. So The device itself is really about the size of a solid-state hard drive. So it kind of tricks you at first. You think that that's probably, you know, field-friendly, right? You can try to use it to steal other people's access card content. But it's not just that device, right? So you've got to power it. So you need like a power bank for like a phone. And then the antenna. So depending on the type of system, you've got high and low frequency. So 2 different antennas on the old model. The newer model, they've made it a lot more streamlined. But that basically equates to 3 things and cables that you have to figure out how to cart around and not look suspicious doing. And the cables don't stay in very well. So if the cable's not pushed in all the way, the lights will work and it will tell you that it got a good card read. And then when you go to replay it, there's nothing there because the cable is loose. Not very field friendly, but again, that's what we had in the beginning. The read range on this is just a few centimeters too. Do you know how hard it is to get a few centimeters from somebody's badge without being all creepy? Really hard. Even for a female, it's really hard. Some of the major metropolitan areas where there's like a train, you know, like Manhattan, that's a lot easier because you just kind of shove in with everybody on the train. Places like, I don't know, St. Paul, right, where they're used to having their nice personal bubble and they don't want anybody in their bubble, that's a lot harder. Like, you've got to get creative with that. I'm clumsy, I fall, you know, people help me up. It's really nice of them. When they bend over, then the badge kind of hangs down so I can get it close to whatever it is I'm using to read the card. Some folks put this like down the inside of their jacket, but my arms are short, my hands are small, so I can't really conceal everything. So I had to figure out a way to do that. So this was my RFID binder of doom, which sounds cool and looks cool. It ended up not working that well, which is kind of sad, right? So I just took some Velcro, pulled back the undercover on that. Proxmark's in the bottom. That's just a little battery pack from like Best Buy or something. It doesn't take a lot of power, so that little battery pack will power it for a long time. Thread the cable through on the other side. That's the low frequency antenna. Had to look for the CD holders because, you know, I don't really use those anymore. I had a big box though. It was cool. So you zip it all up and then you just basically need to kind of tap the folder close to the badge. So there are a couple different ways to do that, but the leather on the folder actually prevented the antenna from powering the card, which is what you need to, there's a little tiny chip in there that you got to power it. Proximity, yes. To get the information from it. So while it looked cool, the results varied and weren't that great in the field. For those of you who like the Gridit, I love the Gridit. It's designed to hold all kinds of little accessories, like for us Mac people that need 16 adapters to do anything. It also holds the pieces for the Proxmark really well, because it's got those little rubber grippers on there. It keeps everything in place, and it keeps the cables fairly steady. The problem with the Proxmark, I mean, there are a lot of problems with it, but if it loses power, it loses its data. Yeah, so, you know, you've done all this work, you've gotten close to somebody, you've got your card read, you've got to get it back somewhere to either replay it at the card reader itself, or replay it, like, back in the hotel room to one of your devices so that you can write it to another card so it's a little more reliable. So if by the time you get it all back there and you're all excited and then you realize that you don't have any data, it's a big bummer. But we put this in a laptop sleeve, so it made it a little bit easier, a little more mobile. You can kind of swing it when you're walking, bump into people. It was a little easier. Early days, right? So that was more of the early days of how we did some of the entry. Haven't seen these in the building here, but I'm sure you've seen them around. That little white box usually makes a weird clicky noise when you get close to it. Normally associated with doors with the 2 mag locks, the 2 bolts on the outside of the door. So that's called a request to exit, or a REX. Bless you. And for reasons that I guess I sort of understand, some building owners don't want people to be inconvenienced enough to have to push a button to open the door, the controlled door, to exit, to leave. So they put a motion detector on the inside, thinking that, you know, if you're there and you're approaching the door to leave, that you belong there, so it will just release the door so that you can leave without having to swipe or to push any kinds of buttons. And this is great in theory, until you get people like us with sophisticated tools. Sophisticated tools, being a coat hanger, You can unfold it and make a pretty little flag. And if there's a nice gap between the doors, if they're double doors, you can just slide it in between and then wave the little flag, and it will trigger that motion sensor on the inside, right? So you hear the click, and then the door is open. Under the door works sometimes too. So see if my video clip works. It literally, if you do it right, it literally pops open that fast, right? So if you look at the card reader, those usually flash green when they've had a successful open from the outside. Still red, right, because it hasn't received a signal from the outside to open. This is important for a couple of reasons, because in the packs, in the control system, on the inside of the door, that's its normal operation, is to release that way. So it's releasing that way because it thinks that somebody is on the inside and they're leaving. That means that it won't throw an alarm for somebody to go investigate. Do people actually investigate those alarms immediately? No, not really, but occasionally some do. Yeah.
I've seen, you know, those cans of air that you can use to move the dust from your computer.
Yes.
Flip those over, they work.
They do. Some of them are motion, some are heat-based, some are infrared, right? So you just got to interrupt the stream. So if you vape, some people can blow a vape stream through there. My favorite one, I think, is by a guy. His name is Deviant. No, not making that up. He works for a company called Core Security. He actually opened one of these with a mouthful of whiskey. You just get up to it and blow the whiskey through really hard, and then it would trigger the Rex on the inside. It's on YouTube, so, you know, check it out. It's really fun. It was really fun when we were testing this in random buildings and random cities that we were traveling to as well. So there were a lot of failed video footage out there for it, but it works pretty well. So the way to help control that, if you don't want to make your employees push buttons or enter codes or swipe cards to leave, is to adjust the beam, the range on that, so it's out further. So it's supposed to be more toward inside of the room. That has good and bad. One of the problems with it, though, is that people like me are persistent and just find something else to go in the door. So when you blow this up, like, I have kids, right? So I have a little hand pump and little balloons for the kids' parties. So you put it between the door, and then you just use the hand pump to pump it up till it's just about ready to pop, and you let it go. Right? So on the inside, it goes like this, and then it will trigger the Rex and open the door. When it doesn't work, there's a pile of balloons on the inside that you can't get to. It's a little embarrassing. I usually just blame the cleaning crew. I'm like, I don't know what kind of place you're running around here. I mean, they're having parties at night and stuff when you're not here. You should check your cameras. Oh, you don't keep that footage. Huh. You should think about that. Because I have kids, I also read books, you know, that talk about you can't go over it, you can't go around it, you can't go through it, you go under it, right? Data centers and places with, you know, important servers in them usually have raised floors, so it's easier to run the cables and whatnot. Most of the walls will go all the way to the true floor, but I found that a lot of times the contractor cuts some corners, and they don't do that in doorways. Right, so even if it's along the wall and you pull a tile and, you know, the wall's all the way to the bottom, the true floor, go find a doorway and look there too. So for those of you who have never crawled underneath of a raised floor, that's the action shot. Be careful, because sometimes they run like really big power cables underneath of there. So just have a look before you go in there and make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself. Those tiles are weighted. I don't know if you can see kind of like the grid on them. They weigh about 40-ish pounds. You got to give them a really good bump with your shoulder on the inside to get it up so that you can let yourself out. And then you can just open the door for your buddy outside. Same thing with a drop ceiling, right? So most of these have a raised floor and a drop ceiling. If they did the floor, sometimes they forget the ceiling, and if you have the skinny guy that weighs $1.15, you can just shove him through. You know, he never went on another test with us after that. It's just kind of a bummer. I'm like, well, it's me or you, so unless you're going to pick me up and toss me over there, I think that you're going to have to do it. But he was kind of scarred from that. We already talked about the hinges, so I'm not going to go through that again. Just because doors look like they shouldn't open when they're assessed does not necessarily mean that they won't. This is a pre-production data center, basically the last step before they put it into production. And of course those networks would never connect to production. I mean, that would be bad, and we wouldn't do that. So they put those doors on so that the people with server carts didn't have to try to worry about opening the door and swiping the card, but if you just shove it, it will open. Yeah.
Tried both doors. I will confess I got here extremely early. I went to open one of the doors. It didn't open. Some of the other, thinking there may have been some of the organizers, opened the other door and it opened. I'm like, no!
And then it's, how'd you get in here?
Actually, I kind of also did a
Through the door?
little bit of tailgating.
Yeah, excellent. Love tailgating. So the reason that free flows that way was for fire code, right? In the event of a fire, that door needs to openly flow, openly open. I don't know. I didn't get a lot of sleep. So anyway, but that does not mean that it should open whenever you just wanted to from the outside, right? Because you're not inside, so that shouldn't happen. Had to change some settings on that door, but we did fix it. The guy that was with us was not happy, though. This was at the point where we'd gotten in about 6 different ways. Sometimes they insist on coming with you. You could do this test, but one of the physical security guys has to come with you. I'm like, whatever, he can hold the camera, because we get some good shots here. At this point, he's just lost all hope. So he's like, leave it open. Because it will alarm after it's left open for so long. He's like, leave it open. I want to see if one of my guards will come down and check it out. 10 minutes later, with the door still open, nobody was there. So lots of improvements to be made at that facility. Let's talk about fences. They make great neighbors, and other sayings that I can't recall at this exact moment. Lots of different kinds, right? So we can deal with these. Again, they're not necessarily meant to keep you out, just slow you down long enough to get caught. Security control's gone wrong. Does anybody know what's wrong with this fence? You don't have to raise your hand, just go. Yeah, so the barbed wire is supposed to go the other way to make it hard for people to climb over the fence, right? So it's supposed to, because you would have to kind of like lean back to get over the barbed wire. I cannot tell, this is my biggest pet peeve. I see this everywhere. I can't tell you how many places I've been to or driven by that the barbed wire on their fence is the wrong way.
Well, it's to keep people in.
I mean, unless that's like an iPod factory or something, I don't really know if you need to keep people in. And if you're going to keep people in, you probably need more than that. But you never know, right? So, right, it could be a prison. If it's a prison, it's not a good one. There's a really nice gap underneath of that fence, too, if you take a look there. They can be dealt with in other ways. Clients get really upset when we do this, so we don't do that often. Again, back to the kids' book, right? Can't go through it. You can go over it. Just because it has barbed wire doesn't mean that that can stop you. You just take the floor mat and put it over the barbed wire, pat your hands there. So I'm a big burn notice fan, right? So I decided to include it here because it's awesome. Right, so they work in teams here just like we do. You use folks to roll up and create the distraction, right? So that the security guard's not watching his camera that you'll see in the background. I should have put some audio on this. Sorry about that. It never works with the projectors and stuff, so demo fails and all of that. You don't really need the words, but they're entertaining because they're arguing.
Yeah, it's making it look like he has a domestic dispute. So,
right? They're trying to find a restaurant. So then it's, you told me this was the address, and we're going to be late. We're going to miss our reservation. So I can't do the flip like that, though. When you do that, take that floor mat with you if that's how you're planning on leaving. Because it's a one-way trip otherwise. Not good. All right, we're starting to get short on time, and I've got so many other great things to talk about. Let's see. All right, 12 minutes. Let's see what I can do. Okay, so client story, rural Pennsylvania.
Okay, this is...
SCADA client, let's call it. So these guys have a control center for the smart grid. We don't even have enough time to talk about the smart grid. That's a whole different talk. Their control center was 4 stories underneath of a building, and we were never getting in, so we shouldn't even try. I love when they tell me that. It's so encouraging. So where the blue dot is the back door to this building. The yellow dot's where I parked my car and drank my Starbucks while I was observing. They were doing construction on this building. The guys in the back the construction guys were using that entrance, and at first they were really good about it. They would open the door, they would close it behind them, open the door, close it behind them. Then as they started carrying things in, the door started staying open a little longer and a little longer, and then the paint bucket came out, right, and they just propped it open and left it open. So that was cool. I had already cloned one of the access cards, but I didn't know if it had access to the control center stairwell to go down the 4 stories to get to the control center. One of those where you won't find out until you get there, right? So, again, sophisticated tools, right? Cloned a badge, and that was useful, but really, sometimes it's just the basics, right? So, usually we hit up a thrift store nearby the client site to get some swag, jackets and whatnot. Couldn't find any there, so we just had one made. So we've got some really nice jackets with some client logos on them that we had made up. But the problem with that was they turned out to be nicer than the ones that they gave the employees. So it kind of drew a little bit more attention. Oh, where'd you get that? Oh, it's new. I just started. I don't know. They gave it to me. Clipboard. Clipboard will get you so many places because you look like you belong and you look important, right? You always look important with a clipboard. So I get in with the back door there, and I get to the hallway to where you go in to get to the card reader with the stairwell, right? So my fake badge would get me into that hallway, but it wouldn't get me down to the stairwell. That had a biometric reader on it. I keep bumping this cable. Had a biometric reader on the card reader there. Those can be dealt with, but at the time I did not have what I needed to deal with it. So then I decided it's just a small hallway, right? So, and that's the only thing there. So if you're standing there, it's obvious that you're waiting to go down there. Like there is no like hang out and read a book and look natural. There's nowhere to go. So my next thought was, I'll just grab the door when somebody comes out. If the door closes slowly enough, you can grab it and let yourself in. So this younger guy comes out, and the door literally just slams behind him. Like, he didn't even touch it, so they'd already thought of that, which was cool. They got some bonus points there. So I decided, well, we're out of time, so now or never, right? So I grabbed the guy. I'm like, hey, I'm from the audit department. Clipboard, right? Clipboard with spreadsheet-looking things on it. Said, I'm doing asset inventory. This is a big thing in the government and the military. They're always doing asset inventory, right? Commercial space, they're getting a little bit better, so it's kind of like the thing now. So there are 4 printers down here that I need to get the serial number and verify their asset tag ID on them. Is there somebody who can let me in? He's like, well, I can let you in. Okay, that's cool. He's like, but we have to check in with security first. Okay. You know, I had a fake badge, and we have a badge printer, right? So it's the same kind of printer that they use, which is funny because when we got caught later on, our badges actually looked better than theirs. So they were kind of fascinated at that. They didn't understand. But checking with security basically meant security guy didn't look up from the novel he was reading, shoved the sign-in sheet at me, and then said, okay, go ahead, you know, because she's with you, right? He's like, oh yeah, she's with me. With him. And that consisted of checking with security. Nobody looked at the employee badge that I had. Nobody bothered to look me up on the system to make sure I belonged there. None of that. Good times. So he takes me down, right? Opens the door with a biometric reader, goes down the 4 stories. There's another door with another biometric reader to get into the control center at the bottom. So even if my grab the door really quickly before it closes had worked, it would have been even more obvious that I was standing there in the bottom of the stairwell with the only place to go right in front of me that I couldn't open the door. And I'd have to wait for somebody else and then try to act like all slick. But they all know each other down there. Because when you're locked in a windowless room for 8 to 10 hours a day, you get to know the people that are there really well. So need a cover story to go with that, right? I don't belong, obviously, in many ways. Not a lot of women in SCADA, right? So it's kind of like a unicorn walks in. It's the girl doing here? We don't have girls down here. Girls don't know anything about computers. So we get in there, and then the guy just like walks away. Okay, so I go over to the closest printer that I can find, and it does have an asset tag on it, so I wrote it down, you know, because I was there, why not? Doing my thing, taking some shots with my cell phone that I wasn't supposed to have in there to prove I was there. Other than the camera footage that they should have been keeping, but that's another story. He's off to go find the other printers for me. So he goes and finds the other tag numbers and comes back with a list. I'm like, oh, awesome, thanks, man. That's so cool. Right, so, and, you know, we get our printers, he walks me out, I sign out, I leave. 5 minutes. Right, 5 minutes from the time I walked in from the paint bucket to getting down there to getting my stuff and out. Right, so you don't want to spend a lot of time, because the more time you spend, the more they're like, wow, this might not be right, you know. If you don't know what a smart grid control center looks like, it looks like that. Cool stuff, right? You can see where the power is going and how they've rearranged it. That's a stock photo. I made sure that when I was taking the pictures to get like the clipboard of my arm in them, so they didn't think that I had taken a photo of like the one on the wall in the lobby or something. I was there, just in case, right? Because we were hired by the audit department, which meant that we were hated by everybody, instead of security, right? So when auditors come in to audit security people, and security people aren't doing it on their own free will, they're not very cooperative. So that's always been challenging, let's say. So they're like, okay, fine, you got that one. You're never gonna find our backup control center. Okay. Like, we're not even gonna tell you where it is. You gotta find it yourself. All right, I mean, you got the hours for it, so you know, I'll use the hours in the recon, that's fine. Knew it couldn't be too far away though, just based on some of their procedures and their personnel in the area. Like, all right. There are rules about how far away it should be for certain certifications in the industry. I don't think they actually meet that rule, but I'm not an auditor, so whatever. So I did some digging, you know, and it was okay. I couldn't really find a lot online, didn't see it on their website, didn't see it on Google. Couldn't find the real estate record where they bought any other property than their own that I knew about. Somebody checked in on Foursquare from this place. I went blah 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 training center today. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So he didn't work there anymore. I don't know if that was directly related to the Foursquare post or not. You don't even get cell phone signal out there, so I'm not exactly sure how he did Foursquare. But anyway, that's not my deal. Oh, they don't Wi-Fi out there at all. But anyway, so I find this place on the map, right, and this is the road to get to this place. I'm like, okay, I think I saw some movies that started like this. There will be no blending and no Starbucksing and taking photos and just kind of chilling near this place. So you start down this road, there's nothing, nothing, nothing. You start to see a building, it pops up. I'm like, whoa, that looks awesome. And then it's gone again, right? It's literally just a few seconds and that's it. It's like a 1.5 lane road, so you can't really fit 2 cars on it without having to pull over to let somebody by you. So there's no just hanging out. Got a fence there. Okay, that can probably be dealt with. So once I knew where it was, I could start to really check out the aerial and stuff on Google. Quick side tangent. This building is awesome. So it's actually one of the old AT&T Long Lines offices from the Cold War. So it used to have a nuclear blast rating and everything on it, until they decided to make it their backup control center and messed it all up. So cool history on that building. I mean, if I was going to build a backup site, like this would be a really good qualifier for it. Right? It's secured. Secured. So if we look at the dots here on the map, this is where we decided that we were going to try to breach the fence. Can't climb it very easily, so we had to come up with some other ideas. Again, sophisticated tools. Can't go over it, can't go around it, but you can go under it. So we dug under the fence. That's me on the wrong side of the fence. You can't see the no trespassing sign, but I thought that was pretty awesome. You know, memories. So get on the fence, trying to get my other team member under the fence, and it's dark, right? It snowed, and I was in my black ninja suit instead of my white. Anyway, So we get under the fence and we start to shimmy. The other guy just said 2 minutes, so I get it though. I'm almost done. It's the best part. I still have 7.5 minutes. I started my timer. And we see some lights, right? Crap, really? Like, Rent-A-Cop's not even going to come out here and check for himself? He's just going to call the cops? That's pretty lame. I'm kind of disappointed at this point. Back to why cars are important in rental cars. So there's nowhere to park out there if you're going to go dig under a fence, right? So we had to pull off of the road, like about 1/4 of a mile away from this place, and walk down the road in the dark with the shovels, right? So the rental car had out-of-state plates on it. It was pretty new. It was like a Nissan something or other. And it was kind of, we sort of had to pull off close to this house. Not blocking the driveway, but close by so where they could see us. And it turns out the neighbor reported the car as suspicious because it had out-of-state plates. So the cops come and we show them our letter, right? And our badges. And they're like, oh, that's your car, right? We're like, yeah. Like, okay, have a good night. And they leave. I'm like, well, I'm going back under the fence. So at that point, rental cop was like, oh, wow, something might be going on. I should check that out. Right? So game over. We didn't get into that one. As we're walking back to the car, neighbor guy is standing out there waiting for us. We're cold. We're wet. We've been out there 3 hours. We've got long shovels with us, right? So he's kind of, I'm throwing the shovels in the trunk. Like, I'm done, right? I'm ready to go, like, just take a nap. And the neighbor is looking at my boss, who's with me, and he's like, you know, I saw you guys go into the woods with shovels. I watched The Sopranos. Okay.
Really sorry to interrupt you, but we gotta cut you short. It's right at 10.
2 seconds.
2 seconds, okay?
Best slide.
Yeah.
So, my boss looks at him and said, well, what you don't know is 3 of us came in, but only 2 of us came out. So, that's me. Thanks for coming. I'll be right back.